now welcome Anniek. Anniek Wieferink is a martial artist and an ESD instructor who completed her ESD training in Prague in 2022. Passionate about the combination of physical and verbal self-defense skills, she is dedicated to helping people strengthen their confidence, boundaries, and sense of personal agency. Alongside her ESD work, Anniek trains in karate and capoeira and enjoys taking on new challenges from motorcycle riding to chess. Anniek will talk about teaching ESD to ambulance crews. Anniek, please.
Yes, thank you, Annette. And also thank you all for joining. So, how did I begin? I was working as a project leader at the health department in IT. And there was a kind of project between the IT department and also the ambulance. And since I was a project leader, I spoke to all different kind of people. So within both organizations and also with many people of the ambulance. And you can think about the ambulance crew who were driving the ambulance, but also the higher chiefs. So at some point, I went to Prague to learn how to teach self-defense. And I was very passionate about it. So, of course, I was talking about it. And without knowing, I got them also interested in what I was saying. So afterwards, when I came back, fire became even stronger, especially for the ambulance interest. And I was again talking at the coffee machine with people about what I did and how it all went. And also some higher chiefs were listening to what I was saying. And at some point, I was talking to the director of the ambulance. And he came up to me and asked me, okay, what is it exactly that you learned? And is this something that can be in there for us? And after explaining, he was very interested in concept. And I got him intrigued to try a lesson and see if this could be something also for them. And in that way, subconsciously, I made my first client. So I'm very grateful for that. But then, well, cool, I was in. But then I needed to have a plan because, of course, since they were one of my first clients and I don't want to do stuff, okay, I want to do it perfect. And I know that that's not something that is possible, but I can at least try to come close, of course. So therefore, there were a few steps that I took to make sure that I had a perfect lesson plan for them, or at least a fitting lesson plan for them. And first off, I started, of course, with research. So I looked up statistics, I looked into the prevalence, and it shocked me what I saw because approximately 64% of ambulance workers were at least once victim of verbal or physical aggression. So let it sink in. That's almost 2/3 of the ambulance workers. So that's a really high percentage. And well, of course, that's crazy to me because these are people who want to help and these are people who take care of others. So how can it be so high? So after that, after the research, I started talking to the trainings coordinator, and we were looking at, okay, what can we do? What do they need in his opinion? And I made a global day and evening planning because we wanted to know, okay, what would be the most fitting? Do we want a whole day? Do we need a few hours? And I came up with all kind of stuff that I learned. And also from my karate background, I also took some parts and I was like, okay, maybe this could be fitting. So I made a whole lesson plan for them. And well, after that, we looked into it and found something like, okay, this structure is what we need. But then it also needs to be more specific for the ambulance personnel instead of just a regular ESD training, of course. So point 3 is story time because, well, like I said, I was talking a lot at the coffee machine. I was already in contact with the ambulance crew, the EMT workers. So it was perfect for me to just talk to them and really listen. Okay, what is it exactly what you need? Because of course I can imagine what they go through, but I have no idea what their day-to-day business is, of course. So next to the coffee machine and the training coordinator, I also volunteered to go on a shift with them. And for a whole day, I went on the ambulance shift, and it was amazing because then you see firsthand what they have to go through, what kind of issues they come up with. And of course, that's just a day, and they have way more that they have to cope with. But it was a really nice thing to just see, okay, this is what they need, and we can go work further from that. And point 4 was a trial run because we knew what structure we wanted. We had some stories, so we could figure out how we can shape the program. But then still, what kind of people within the ambulance do we need to teach? Is it the persons who are more senior, or the people who are just currently coming into it, or just everyone? So therefore, we set up a trial run. And in that trial run, there were still students for the ambulance. There were people who were already 20 years into the profession. And after the trial run, we decided, okay, everyone who wants to become an ambulance personnel, they all need to come to me when they are a half year within their field. So, well, that's how it went. And then what more into detail, what kind of persons we are talking about. Because for ESD, I don't have to explain you every different group needs specific different traits. So have different traits and different needs. So specifically for the ambulance personnel, we need to understand that they have a job with high pressure and high adrenaline, since they have to cope with a lot of emotions of others. And also, they have limited information before arrival, because the moment that someone calls 911, mostly there is a lot of emotions, and it's hard to describe a clear view of what is happening exactly. So the moment that they come in, they mostly don't know what is going on, or they don't know what is happening. So that's very important to keep in mind. And of course, I will go further into detail in this later. Another thing is that there is a lot of verbal resistance. So when I talked to the ambulance personnel, some of them had experienced physical assault, but almost everyone had at some point some verbal resistance. So that's very important to keep in mind, that they have to be verbally very strong to just do their regular job. And also something they know is when someone is mad or they are sad, mostly it's not because of something they do, but it's because of the circumstances, because no one is calling 911 if it's a happy situation. So that's also something they have to cope with. What also is something to keep in mind is that they have some psychiatric patients. And what I mean by that is the mental patients. So patients who don't mean harm, but can be harmful. So also for that, there's a different approach. And also a bit about bystander versus patients. And I will go further into that also later. But what I also want to point out is all of them are very hard workers and caring people, because what they do is they go into high adrenaline jobs and then have to care for others. And like I said, 64% of them have some kind of violence against them had in 1 year time. So that they still do it and still go to their work every day, that's mad respect I have for them. Let's see. So, well, like I said, I will go further into the psychiatric parts and also which tools can help them. So about the awareness of their environment, I've already said it before, they have no clue in what kind of neighborhood of stuff they are going, or what kind of house they are going. So awareness of their environment and training them accordingly is very, very important, because scanning what kind of neighborhood they are in. Is it a rich neighborhood? Is it a poor neighborhood? When they arrive, how does the garden look? Is the garden well maintained, or do they say all sloppy kind of stuff? Are there pets already walking around in the house? Because if there's a dog, it can be that they are going to protect their boss. So that's all kind of stuff that you have to look for. And when they go into the house, there are also stuff you have to keep in mind. So think about, are there drugs lying around? Do you see alcohol? How many people are in the room? Do you see some kind of swords? And what room is the patients in? Since in the bathroom, for example, mostly you just have one exit. So if you go in there, you have to keep in mind where your exit is and where you are positioning yourself in case that something went wrong. And for example, the psychiatric patients, where they also have to cope with often, then it's important to keep in mind that you are not blocking the exit, because that can drive them mad, because they feel like you're, blocking them. So you have to position yourself in a way that you are far closer to the door, but still the patient doesn't feel blocked or entrapped inside the room with you. And also for psychiatric patients, I learned that, or at least most patients, that if they are in the kitchen, that's also the place where most people have their knives. So be really aware of that, because it's also not an uncommon thing that they get threatened by knives. So if you can get a patient to another room than the kitchen, get them out of that room, because you don't want a knife fight, of course. So that's about the awareness of their environment part. Another thing is the de-escalation methods. Of course, we all know different kind of de-escalation methods, but for the ambulance personnel, mostly, at least in the Netherlands, they arrive with two of them. So one is mostly an ambulance driver, and the other one is a nurse. So since they are different, since they have different roles, they also have different roles when they are going into an environment. So the nurse is going to be the one who is taking care of the patients, and the driver will be the one who is constantly scanning the environment, looking if something is escalating, looking if something is going well, also checking the exits. So that's mostly their part, but also the nurses need to do that, and it needs to be trained in that. So for the de-escalation methods, they also have they can also have each other to use as de-escalation and help each other, but also use police. Don't go inside a home if you feel like there could be threats or there could be danger there. Use helpful citizens when you are on the streets and people are around you. You can also give citizens tasks so they can go away from the patients, but also make sure that other bystanders will stay away. Also, stuff that I find helpful are the disabling of strangulation and wrist grips, especially in the ambulance themselves. It sometimes happens that patient is grabbing the nurse who is sitting next to them. So I give them some ways of defending themselves in a way that won't threat the patient, and also the ways of disarming them. So those are things you can keep in mind. In general defense techniques, way of standing, always keeping your head to the perpetrator. So a whole set of those kind of skills I come up with. And afterwards, I find it's very important to come up with grounding techniques because, as you can imagine, they have a high adrenaline job. So all the time they are in high adrenaline, they have to focus, they have to be aware of what is happening. Because if you miss um, certain points, you could be in danger, and that's not something that you want. So to go home normally, I help them with looking, okay, what are people who I feel close with? What are ways I can go back to earth again? How can I ground again? So like tapping, breathing exercises, just depending on what kind of group I have before me, I go into depth about what ways we can help them ground. And lastly, confidence. It's not a specific tool, of course, but I found that a lot of drivers or also nurses feel like if someone is attacking them, oh, well, I don't do anything about fighting, so it doesn't matter what I do. So I really try to help them overcome that. If something is happening, you have to do something because otherwise you've already lost. So in generally, I won't go further into this, but giving them confidence is important for them as well. So, well, this all said, I made a final draft, what should be in there. The tools which should be in there, I already told before, next to other stuff, of course. And what we came up with is one training day in which it's approximately 40% verbal and 60% physical. And the reason for this is because they mostly have to go through different cases of verbal resistance. Most of them are already very good with coping with this because, for example, the dog within the home, it's not that one person in the whole of Netherlands has a dog. There are many people who have a dog, and you don't want to operate with a dog around. So they have to do this, well, a lot of times to just make sure that they can do their work properly. And within verbal, I also classify the being aware of your surroundings because it's also something we work a lot with. And for the physical part, I do a lot of different stuff that they can learn to defend themselves, but also ask them, okay, what is it exactly what you need? What is it what you have experienced? What is stuff that you heard that others have experienced and you want to have skills with? I think also because I have in karate and capoeira, it's easy to just come up with additional physical stuff on the spot. So of course, I've always have my general plan what I want to teach them, but I also try to be flexible in it and make sure that they get what they want out of the day and go home with more confidence in that they can really defend themselves. And also what I didn't say is what I also try to learn them is a bit of groundwork, as in very basic. If you go to the ground, what is something you can do to just come up more quickly and keep your perpetrator away from you? Since I also understood that it sometimes happens that someone is diving onto them, or since they are already sitting on the ground, that they feel very vulnerable in it. So that also seems to help. Well, and then training day.
Anniek,
Yeah?
just a moment. There is one person here with their microphone open. Can you please turn your microphone off? I don't know how to pronounce this name. Anastine? Thank you. Okay. You can continue, please. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. So for the training day, like I said, it's obligated for them to come there. So not everyone who comes to my training is really glad that they are there. especially since they have a lot of training days during that time. I can imagine that it can sometimes be much. And also, you can imagine that there are all different kind of people who come into my class. And I also sometimes had that a man of 50 years who had some experience in the military also came to me. And then those kind of people sometimes think, okay, what are you going to teach me? But I've learned that it's very important in general, but especially then to ask people for what they have experienced and what that they also share what they know. Because especially if someone has a background which is also which is in the ambulance and also some kind of fighting experience, that's awesome because they know so much stuff and can also enhance my course, of course. So in the beginning of the training, I always ask them, okay, what are your goals and what do you need from me? And according to that, I switch to mostly physical, mostly verbal, depending on what they need. And since it's all different ages and different genders, it also helps that I've seen that mostly women like more about, they are more like, okay, I'm not sure if I'm doing this correctly, and they are more unsure about themselves, generally speaking, of course. And the males in the audience, they are more like, okay, I lose my temper very quickly, and I want to know how I can just reduce it a bit. So that's a completely different way of playing with the verbal skills. So that's very interesting to do, and also that they can learn more about each other. And next to the sharing stories, I also had my fair share in calling 911. So I also try to share some experiences like, okay, this is what I've seen. I really admire your work because I do admire their work because it's awesome what they are doing. And I try to keep an open mind about, okay, tell me what you need from me, and that is what I'm going to teach. And I think that really helps, and also make sure that they know that I am there for them. Because, of course, I'm very passionate about teaching and I find it a really interesting group to teach. But in the end of the day, my goal is to give them more confidence and make sure that they can go safely into their ambulances and feel well about it. So that's also what I'm trying to enhance. And I feel like that's also working very well because also the more experienced people, or even though every one of them is a half year within the ambulance school, doesn't mean that they haven't had experience in other fields. So it really helps to learn more from them. And if they say something great, then I apply it in my next course. So I also learning a lot of it. Yeah, and I think that's mostly of my presentation. So I'm going to close it. But yeah, in the end, I think with this group, they are very caring. They are really strong-minded, generally speaking. So I find it a really interesting group to work with them. So yeah, I would really recommend it because these people, everyone deserves, of course, to know how to defend themselves, but these people especially because they are taking their lives and they are yeah, their well-being on the line to help others, and I find that very admirable. So that's my presentation. Are there any questions? I don't hear you, Annette.
Yes, I have two questions. So the first one is, where did you find the statistics about the you said that like 64% of them were attacked in some way. Where was the statistics in? Is it like an internal statistics from the ambulance people?
This is something I found online, but it's also something I get back from the coordinator with which I'm talking to. And I also see it in the lessons that I teach that actually most of them already had some experience with verbal aggression, and not it doesn't have to mean that it was very high, but still it was some verbal aggression in the way they work.
Mm-hmm. And the other question was, you said something about the dynamics between the male and the female in the class. So I would like if you can talk a little bit more about it, because I mean, since you mentioned different ages and different dynamic, different, genders, ages and stuff. So I'm assuming, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming some guys come with all this, I already know everything. And so how do you work with that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. What helped me most with those people is that what helps me most is that beforehand I give them, after I introduce myself, I ask them to also introduce themselves and tell me a bit about who they are and what they expect from the lesson. And in that, mostly you can already feel like, okay, I think this might go this way or this might go that way. Of course, you can't place everyone in a certain area, but it helps me a bit to understand what kind of class I'm going to teach. And if I feel like that there are people in there who are going to question my authority or are going to try to, see in what ways they can disrespect and how much I can take. At that moment, I try to just do my thing, and afterwards tell them, okay, well, these are my suggestions, but you have so much experience, or maybe you also have some pointers or ways what you would do in this scenario. And I feel like that in the beginning that it's still, well, figuring each other out, but afterwards they see, okay, if I want to share something or if I want to say something, I also get my moment to share. And I feel like most of the time that helps. But I also had some times that, also with women, not only with men, but that they said, okay, well, I find good stuff that you are teaching for the verbal, but it doesn't work for us because we already know how to do it. And then I also say, okay, well, of course, if you all feel like that, then we can skip this part and we can go further to another part, or that I'm just going to test the water to see, okay, I try to be as flexible as possible, especially since I know enough stuff to fill a whole day. And I want to have us both, feeling satisfied in the end of the day. So then I make a list about, okay, what is it that you want me to, what is it that you want to hear from me, or what is it that you want to get out of the lesson? Now, sometimes they come up with 8 different things that 5 of them I already prepared, and then we just go through that, and then they feel more fulfilled. So that's how I try to cope with that.
Tamzin, does that answer your question? That I didn't get to ask, but she actually
just
talked about it.
Perfectly answered. Thank you, Anniek.
Linda, you have a question?
Yes, Annie, great work. And yes, you're totally right that this group needs to be supported. I've got 2 questions. Number 1, sometimes when I work with professionals, and I admit it, some of their stereotypes are not actually helping de-escalation. Like, for example, at the doctor's office, of course, it's not the ambulance, like, where is your insurance card? What's your insurance number, policy? Wait in the line. Like the tone, we all get that. So how are you managing to show them the other side, let's say, of the coin, that sometimes they also need to adjust their behavior? And the second phenomenon, or the second question, would be linked to not the violence from the patients, because that's what I heard that the professionals are sort of trained, but very often the violence can come from relatives, from worried family member, from a drunken spouse, and so on. So how do you address these? If they are two people and they might face a number of other people also dangerous, not the patient themselves. Thanks. And great work.
First, we'll go into the second part because I completely forgot to tell that. But indeed, most of the cases, the patients just want to be helped, and the bystanders are mostly the problem if there is any case of verbal aggression. So you can, for example, think about a child who is very ill and a mother who wants that their child goes with them to the hospital, even though the ambulance crew said no, it's not necessary in this case. So what helps mostly is the deflection method of de-escalation, so that you say, okay, and also the humanization, that they also have to say, okay, I understand that this is a really hard situation, and I know this is emotional, and I feel really sorry for you, kind of those words, to make sure that also the patients and the bystanders understand that it is indeed not a nice situation. It's a hard situation. And after that, when you have brought them emotionally more to your level, that you can say, okay, but if you feel really worried, or if the klachten, the causes, the stuff that's happening are still coming up, then you can always call the hospital. You can always call 911 again. That you deflect it in that way. Or another thing what also helps is, like I said, for bystanders, that it are family members, that they don't go in until the police arrived. That's also sometimes something I have to enhance to them, because they are not always sure if they can do that. So I have to enhance that their safety goes first. So if they feel like, okay, this might become an aggressive situation, this might become a problem, then you wait until the police is there and you don't go in there beforehand. And also, you are allowed to just say you don't want to give them care unless they change their behavior. So you can go back to your ambulance, lock the door if it's necessary. And that's also something I have to enhance. Yes. And what was your first question again?
That was about the fact that sometimes they escalate instead of de-escalate, that the reactions, the pressure, some wrongly, let's say, some wrong approach, like, oh, you should have done this, instead of, again, acknowledging that it's a problem, yes, acknowledging that you might see it differently as a caring person and so on. So
Yes, what I try to do with that.
yeah, basically, how do they respond to the fact that sometimes they they should de-escalate instead of escalate, that their behavior needs to change, that it's not that the others are wrong?
Yes. That's also an interesting question. Mostly one of the things I do for the verbal part is that you have the solution and solution suggestion, and also the one with the feeling. And indeed, sometimes they say, oh, for our work, we don't have time to go through all of that. So we have to have the direct response. So then I try to challenge them. Okay, what do you say in these situations? And okay, but try to play with the other ones. What would you say in that case? And most of the time they are like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe it might also be good to do. And also for the de-escalation, like I said, I use the humanization one. So just say, I feel sorry for you. I understand that this is a hard situation, because in that way you can de-escalate so much if you show people that you actually understand that this isn't an easy situation for them. And I also try to emphasize that they are used to high adrenaline situations, but most people are not. So yeah, so I think those stuff helps them. And also, of course, most are direct indeed, but still also caring. So I think that helps.
Thank you.
There are two questions from Gintiana. Have you written or are you planning to write about the process and your experience, including feedback from the participants?
No, I have not done that. But I'm thinking about, I am now involved in 2 different locations of the ambulance, and to make it more broader, so I can, well, the Netherlands wide is a bit too broad, but just a few more regions as well, next to the regions I'm already teaching.
So we would love it if you will write about it. Second question is, do you think there's a chance to replicate this with other companies or organizations?
Yes, in some way, I think it's definitely replicable. However, the way I have my program now is very specific to the ambulance personnel. So if you do it for nurses, for example, in a hospital, I think most of the things you can copy. But the cases, for example, in the traffic light I use are very specific to what they can encounter and what I've heard from their stories and what I've seen in the shift I took with them. So these stuffs are too specific. But indeed, if you want to do it for other ambulances, of course, then I would highly recommend it, because use the front work I've done for you all and do it. Yeah, that would be awesome.
I think the process of the process you described is something that people can copy. Not necessarily. I mean, obviously, people can copy your work with ambulances in other countries, and maybe you would like to share it with other people if they approach you. But I think the process you mentioned was excellent, and that's something that you can share. Also, I have one more question. Do you do role plays with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't. And the reason for that is that I know they have another course in which they only do role plays and those kind of stuff. So that's what I skip out. And also, these are mostly very direct people, and they don't like to turn around and walk through the point. So the way of my teaching is also very direct, very to the point. I don't do games. It's just, this is what you need, this is what we are going to do, and that's also my teaching style for them.
Thank you.